I hate fast travel. It certainly serves a useful function, but it's a feature that's power is easy to overlook and abuse. Fast travel has practically become a given in most open world games, which seems a little backwards because companies market their titles on massive worlds that they then let players move across in an instant with little to no cost or consequence. At its worst, it disconnects players from everything between point A and point B, shrinking worlds down to menu interactions and distracting players from the vision that developers most likely intended. It takes an expansive, non-linear experience and squeezes it into a tiny hallway where players are no longer on a journey, but rather a quick path to being done with a game. Now, the obvious counter to everything I just said is to not use it, but that actually leads me to what I hate most about fast travel. In too many titles, it feels unavoidable. And that's mostly because the act of manually traveling to a specific location is pretty boring. The way I see it, there are two major factors that play into this. The first is that a lot of open world games have dull movement mechanics, and the second is that there isn't enough to do when traveling to a specific location. Starting with movement, it's often very basic, and while some games try to throw in free running or vehicles, heading to a destination often just feels like pressing forward and sometimes watching a stamina bar deplete and then replenish. It's mindless. Hell, The Witcher 3 even went as far as making movement partially automated. There should be more to it than that. In my experience, third-person titles typically handle movement in more interesting ways than first-person ones. This is mostly because they tend to be less focused on realism, allowing for more possibilities. For example, Prototype, while lacking in many other areas, excelled in having free and fluid movement when traveling around the city. Stringing together different powers to avoid touching the ground was satisfying, and it took a hell of a lot more effort than just pressing forward. Movement in this and other games like Infamous, Arkham City, and Sunset Overdrive become challenges in seeing how long one can go without touching the ground, which adds an entire new layer to traversal. Giving players more things around a map to interact with and more ways to interact with them is important in making movement less tedious. It's also important to give players a reason to manually travel. A great example of this can be found in Oblivion, where running and jumping are both tied to skills that level up the more they are used. This makes travel feel like it progresses a character by acting as a reward for not just skipping over everything. In general, it seems pointless to have giant worlds if moving across them is both joyless and unrewarding. And this leads me into my second point. There isn't enough to do when moving toward a specific destination. I want to be clear, I'm not saying that there aren't a lot of things to do in most open world games, because there certainly are. However, I have two very different mindsets for when I'm exploring versus when I'm traveling. When I'm exploring, things like checking out caves, chilling with locals, and battling forts of enemies are all great times. But when I'm traveling to complete a quest, I have very little interest in doing things that aren't directly going to help me complete that quest. So for a player like me, all of those cool things become non-factors. In open world games, the conventional wisdom in making heading to an objective more interesting is to have quick interactions that keep players entertained without slowing them down too much, which plenty of games try to do, but often struggle to pull off. Mad Max does a decent job with this by having different outposts that players can take out from their car, along with random events like dust storms that they need to avoid. The same idea can be seen in pretty much every JRPG ever in the form of random encounters. What winds up being the issue with these examples is, like anything else, they start to feel very samey over time. Having a mercenary say, "pay a toll or die," might be interesting when it first happens, but experiencing it for a second and third time lessens its effectiveness. To avoid players burning out, these events need to be frequent and diverse. This is extremely important to do with games that consistently have players travel back and forth to the same locations. Some quests intentionally have players go to out-of-the-way and difficult-to-reach places that are then revisited multiple times. Like in Skyrim, the main quest has players travel to High Hrothgar on more than one occasion, which stops being fun after the first trip. Places that need to be returned to frequently should be centralized and easy to get to. In theory, Fallout 4 does a pretty good job with this by having Diamond City located in the center of the map. With that said, when playing, I found myself returning to my home base far more often, which was in the starting location at the top left. All of this really comes down to improving how games approach world and quest design. With open world games being so huge, players spend a lot of time traveling from quest marker to quest marker. I would like to see quests put a bigger focus on how to get somewhere rather than just getting there. The Witcher 3 does some interesting things in this regard with its implementation of the Witcher sense, which is used for tracking in various quests. In the end, it is just another thing that pops up on the screen to follow, but it makes sense contextually visually, and it focuses on a smaller scale, making the moment-to-moment travel more interesting than chasing a dot in the distance. But this issue as a whole isn't something that can be solved solely by character abilities. Worlds need to change as well. Although it would slightly impede on players' freedom, a good way to do this would be by making certain areas only accessible by various travel-based quests. Instead of being told to talk to this person in this place, I'd find it more interesting if quest descriptions were closer to figure out how to get to this place. Here are some reliable options. Maybe there's a ferry that leads to a town and the player would be given a free ride if they help protect it. Or maybe there's a cave that's the most direct path to the same town, but it's the home to a big old monster. For this to work and still give players agency, there would need to be multiple paths like this to every location, and ideally, new options would open up to replace old ones. This would break up travel so it isn't just one long, boring trek, and it would make worlds feel more than just cities surrounded by big, open, empty spaces that reuse the same assets over and over. In the end, there isn't just one solution for making travel less boring in open world titles. It depends heavily on the type of game, so certain ideas I've suggested might work great in one, but make little to no sense in another. I don't think that fast travel should be completely eliminated from games, because it gives players the option to play how they want to. With that said, I do think it needs to have stricter limitations. First and foremost, there should really be an in-game reason that explains why fast travel is possible. It could be magic, it could be a train, just anything other than it being a spot that has already been visited. Secondly, there needs to be a consequence. A lot of games will have time pass, but players don't actually lose anything. It needs to either cost money, or have the player miss out on an opportunity, or put the player in a potentially dangerous situation. Lastly, there need to be set spots that players can travel to and from. Being able to travel from anywhere to anywhere is a bit ridiculous, and it also renders other systems like encumbrance nearly useless. Fast travel is not inherently bad, and in theory, it lets players approach a game at their own pace and in their own way. It makes games more accessible to more types of players, which is a good thing. I just wish it didn't come at the cost of making other parts of the game so damn tedious.